My name is Marjorie Hale. I'm 70 now, though the years feel heavier when my daughter talks about money. Most mornings in Savannah begin the same way for me, slow light through the magnolia trees, the faint hum of a river barge in the distance, and the smell of coffee drifting from my kitchen. I like quiet mornings. They make me feel that time is still mine. That day, Lydia came over earlier than usual. She said she wanted to talk about finances. I should have known then. When your grown child starts using words like that, it's never about helping you. It's about control. She walked in with her tablet tucked under one arm and a paper cup from some cafe downtown. Her perfume filled the room before she did. "You really shouldn't drink so much coffee, Mom," she said lightly, setting her cup beside my chipped teapot. "Caffeine makes older people anxious." I smiled the way mothers do when they want to avoid a fight. She sat across from me, scrolling, nails clicking against glass. For a moment, I just watched her, the curve of her jaw, the little freckle under her left eye. My daughter, the same girl who once practiced Chopin with her feet dangling off the piano bench. She didn't look up when she spoke. "From now on, Mom, we'll help manage your retirement account. You'll still sign, but I'll handle the transfers." The spoon slipped from my hand. The sound metal against tile rang sharp through the kitchen. I stared at her, waiting for a joke, a smile, something. But Lydia kept scrolling, calm as a summer breeze. I said, quietly, "You can't just—" She interrupted, voice even, like she was reading a grocery list. "You don't need to worry about anything, Mom. Just let us take care of it." The words didn't hit all at once. They settled like dust, slow and heavy. I felt them in my chest, my throat, the hollow of my stomach. Outside, a mockingbird sang on the fence, stubborn and bright against the silence. Lydia finally looked up, her eyes cool and polite. "You'll still live here, of course. Bradley and I will handle the bills." I nodded because I couldn't trust my voice. My fingers found the spoon, still cold on the floor. I rinsed it under the faucet and placed it back on the counter, like nothing had happened. By the time Lydia left, the coffee had gone cold. The house felt smaller, as if her words had taken space that used to belong to me. I wiped the table slowly, careful not to shake. Outside, the wind moved through the magnolia leaves. Somewhere deep inside me, something began to shift quietly, but it was there. The house has stood on Gordon Street for 48 years. Harold and I bought it when we were newly married, a 2-story place with white shutters and a porch swing that creaked like it was whispering secrets. Every mark on the floor still tells a story. The scratch from moving Harold's piano, the stain from Lydia spilling grape juice on her 5th birthday. Back then, music filled every corner. I gave piano lessons in the front room, 40 years of little hands pressing wrong notes, of mothers waiting in cars outside, of laughter echoing down the hallway. When Harold came home from the shipyard, he would lean on the doorframe, listening as I played. He never said much, but when he smiled, I knew it was enough. After he passed, the silence grew different, heavier, but still kind. I learned to live with it. What I couldn't live with was the kind of silence that arrived after Lydia and Bradley started helping. It began with boxes. They filled the hallway with folders labeled market potential and property evaluation. Bradley said they were temporary, but weeks passed and they multiplied brochures for houses that weren't mine. They said it was for insurance, but it felt like planning a sale behind my back. Neighborhoods I'd never live in. Lydia brought new curtains, beige and thin, replacing the heavy ones Harold had chosen. More light. She said, I didn't tell her that I liked the shadows better. In the evenings, I'd find her walking through the house, taking photos with her phone. For insurance, she said. She always said things like that, practical, tidy words that left no room for emotion. But when I heard her whisper to Bradley on the porch, "It'll sell faster than I thought," my stomach turned cold. They spoke about me as if I were an obstacle, Not a person. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to wipe the counter, listening to their voices float through the screen door. That night, I sat in the dark at the foot of the piano. The keys were dusty, untouched. My hands hovered above them, unsure what song could still belong to me. The house that had once been my world now felt borrowed, like I was the one living here by someone else's grace. Outside, a storm gathered over the Savannah rooftops, thunder low and patient. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, fear, not of losing the house, but of being erased from it altogether. The next morning, I walked across the street to Miss Edna's porch. She was already outside, as she always was by 8, a cup of tea in her hand and her hair pinned neatly under a scarf. We'd known each other for 40 years, neighbors through storms, funerals, and Sunday gossip. She didn't need to ask why I came. One look at my face and she slid the teapot closer. "Drink first," she said, "then tell me what she's done now." I told her about Lydia, the pension, the boxes, the photographs. I spoke slowly, tasting the bitterness of each word. Miss Edna didn't interrupt, only stirred her tea until the spoon clinked against porcelain. When I finished, she sighed and leaned back. "You've still got your mind, Marjorie," she said quietly. "Use it. Don't hand them your power just because they expect you to." Her words settled deeper than she probably knew. That afternoon, back in my kitchen, I pulled out Harold's old file cabinet from under the stairs. The drawer stuck for a moment, as if it didn't want to remember. Inside were yellowed folders. The edges curled like old leaves, tax receipts, loan papers, insurance letters, all labeled in Harold's careful handwriting. From Whitmore, 1998, a reminder he had always kept for me over the years. Inside was a letter, short and neat. "If you ever need help managing the account, you know where to find me." I traced the signature with my thumb, remembering the banker who used to visit on Fridays, always polite, always patient. Mr. Whitmore had retired years ago, but his name still meant something at the local branch. For the first time in weeks, I felt something small and steady rise inside me. Not anger, not fear, just resolve. By the end of that week, the air inside the house felt different, thicker, as if it carried secrets. Lydia had started working from home, taking calls in the dining room with the door half closed. I could hear her voice through the wall, calm and clipped, discussing final signatures and liquidation schedules. She spoke of me as though I were a property she needed to manage. That evening, I stood in the hallway outside her office, holding a basket of folded laundry. Through the crack in the door, I heard her laugh softly. "Don't worry, Brad," she said. "She'll sign anything I put in front of her. She trusts me completely." The words landed like a slap. I stepped back before she could see me, steadying myself against the wall. The laundry slid from my hands. After she went out that night, I sat at the kitchen table with the old folder I'd found in Harold's cabinet. My husband's handwriting stared up at me, his quiet order, his faith in rules and decency. But decency didn't work with people who saw kindness as weakness. I looked at the bank documents Lydia had left in the open drawer, a copy of my signature. Traced, but not mine. I pressed my palm over it, feeling a faint tremor in my hand. It was then the idea came to me, simple as breath. I went to the pantry, found an old plastic sleeve. Then I wrapped the forms in a waterproof sleeve, wrote a note, "Never underestimate a mother," and slid it into a bowl of water in the freezer, hiding it beneath the custard. The freezer groaned as I set the bowl inside. Beside the lemon custard Lydia loved. Hours later, the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I lay awake, watching the streetlight move across the ceiling. The night felt endless, heavy with waiting. When the clock struck midnight, I heard the front door open. Lydia returning from dinner with friends. Her heels clicked on the tile. She went straight to the kitchen. The fridge door opened with its familiar sigh. Then came the sound I'll never forget, a sharp gasp. followed by a stunned cry. She stared, frozen, unsure how to react. I imagined her staring at the frozen block, the papers visible through the clear ice, the note above them like a verdict. I didn't move. I just lay there, eyes open in the dark. The faint hum of the fridge steady and calm. For the first time in months, I felt the balance of the house shift, not loudly, but enough to breathe again. The next morning, I dressed carefully, a pressed blouse, pearl earrings, and Harold's watch that hadn't ticked in years. I told Lydia I was going to the library, and she barely looked up from her laptop. "Take your time," she said. "You always get lost in those old books." Instead, I walked 3 blocks to the credit union where Mr. Whitmore still worked part-time. The branch hadn't changed much since Harold used to bring me here on Fridays. The same brass clock hung above the counter, the same faint smell of polish and paper. Mr. Whitmore recognized me at once. His hair was whiter now, but his handshake still had that quiet confidence Harold once trusted. "Mrs. Hale," he said, surprised but warm. "It's been years." I sat across from him in his small office, the blinds half drawn. I didn't tell him everything, just enough for him to understand. I showed him the letters Harold had kept, and the forms Lydia had tried to make me sign. He listened without judgment, nodding slowly, eyes narrowing behind his glasses. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Your husband was a cautious man. He kept every document in order. That makes this simpler." We spent an hour going through the accounts. He guided me in setting up a personal trust for my pension, legally binding, with protections only I could authorize. Then he added a clause Harold would have approved of, ensuring that upon my death, the remaining funds and the house would pass to a seniors foundation in Savannah, bypassing Lydia entirely. By the time I left, the afternoon sun was slanting through the live oaks. I felt lighter, steadier. The world outside looked the same, but something inside me had changed shape. That evening, over dinner, Lydia studied me across the table. "You're quiet tonight," she said. I smiled and sipped my tea. "Just tired," I answered. And for once, it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from finally doing something right. 2 days later, Lydia came home early with Bradley trailing behind her. He smelled of aftershave and impatience, holding a neat folder under his arm. "Mom," Lydia said in that bright, careful tone she used when she was about to lie. "We just need your signature on a few updates for the insurance and utilities. Nothing complicated." Bradley smiled, thin and practiced. "It's just to make things easier for everyone." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took the folder. Inside were several pages of fine print, too clean, too deliberate. I could see the faint indentation of my name at the top. I didn't realize yet it wasn't my signature. My heart thudded, but I let my expression stay calm, even a little confused. "Where do I sign?" I asked softly. Lydia exchanged a quick glance with Bradley. "Here and here," she said, tapping the spaces with her pen. My fingers didn't shake. I wrote my name slowly, neatly, on the blank sheets they'd left at the back worthless pages that would lead them nowhere. When it was done, Lydia patted my shoulder. "Thank you, Mom. I'll take care of the rest." They left soon after, laughing in the driveway, their silhouettes framed by the porch light. I stood at the window until their car disappeared. The house grew quiet again, just the ticking clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I walked to the small drawer where I'd hidden Mr. Whitmore's completed papers. Sealed and stamped, everything that truly mattered was already in place. That night, after supper, I called him from the kitchen phone. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask for details. By morning, the trust would be legally recorded, untouchable. Across the street, Miss Edna's light flickered through her lace curtains. I saw her silhouette by the window, hands folded, watching. She lifted her chin as if she understood without words. I turned off the lamp and stood for a long moment in the dark. The faint smell of rain drifting through the open window. The papers they thought would trap me were meaningless now. The real ones quiet, signed, and sealed belonged entirely to me. 3 mornings later, the peace broke like glass. I was sitting at the kitchen table, shelling peas for supper, when I heard the door slam hard enough to rattle the frame. Lydia's voice followed, sharp and breathless. The bank froze everything she shouted. All our accounts gone. They said there's an investigation. Bradley stormed in behind her. His face flushed. He dropped his briefcase on the floor, papers spilling out like debris. What did you do, Marjorie? His tone was low but dangerous. I set the bowl of peas aside and wiped my hands on my apron. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. I just protected what your father built. He stared at me as if the words were a foreign language. Don't play games. You think you can move money around without us noticing? Lydia's hands trembled as she clutched her phone. They said the signatures didn't match, that new documents had been filed without their knowledge documents I had authorized to protect the estate. Her voice cracked. Mom, they think I forged them. The kettle whistled behind me, steady and shrill. I turned off the stove before it screamed. Then maybe they're smarter than you thought, I said. Bradley slammed his palm against the counter. You ruined us, no, I replied, keeping my voice even. You ruined yourselves. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Lydia sank into a chair, her eyes unfocused, lips trembling. We just wanted to help, she whispered. Help, I repeated. By selling my house, by taking the money I earned teaching other people's children, before either of them could answer, there was a knock at the door, firm, official. Through the lace curtain, I saw 2 uniformed officers standing on the porch. Lydia went pale. Bradley straightened his tie, muttering under his breath. One of the officers held up a folder. We're here regarding a report of financial irregularities involving forged authorization forms. We need to ask a few questions. Bradley tried to speak first, but his voice cracked. There's been a misunderstanding. The younger officer nodded politely. Then I'm sure we'll clear it up quickly. They followed him into the dining room. Notebooks open, pens ready. Lydia sat frozen at the table, staring at the steam rising from her untouched cup of tea. I stayed by the sink, watching sunlight spill across the counter where my husband's old watch still lay. For years, this house had been quiet, its walls holding secrets and regrets. Now it echoed with raised voices, the scrape of chairs, the hum of questions no one could dodge. When the officers left, the air smelled faintly of cold metal and fear. Bradley didn't look at me when he walked out. Lydia stayed behind, eyes swollen, hands shaking. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from her. The spoon clinked softly against porcelain, steady and calm. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small in my own house. The truth, at last, had found its voice, and it was louder than any of theirs. Weeks passed before I saw her again. The house had settled back into its old rhythm, the clock ticking, the kettle humming, the quiet steady as breath. One afternoon, there was a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, Lydia stood there alone. Her face was thinner, her eyes rimmed red. She didn't step inside right away, just held onto the doorframe as if asking permission. I nodded, and she followed me into the kitchen. The air between us felt fragile, like glass. She sat where she always had, hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, I didn't want your money, Mom. I realize now how wrong I was, and I don't want to repeat it. I poured tea into 2 cups and set one in front of her. Then learn what it costs to forget who raised you, I said. She stared at the steam rising from her cup, but didn't drink. The silence wasn't cruel anymore, just tired, hollow, necessary. We stayed there until the light outside turned gold. Two women bound by blood and regret, sharing a table that felt both familiar and foreign. Spring came softly to Savannah that year. The air smelled of rain and jasmine again, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the season instead of just noticing it pass. The legal matters were done. The trust had been finalized. I asked Mr. Whitmore to direct part of it toward a seniors' legal aid fund. For women like me, I told him, the ones who don't realize they still have choices. He smiled and promised he would. Miss Edna didn't live to see it. She passed quietly one morning, her teacup still half full, her porch chair empty by noon. The neighborhood gathered that evening with candles and soft voices. When everyone left, I stayed behind, watching the lights flicker across her window. She had fought her battles long before mine and never lost her grace. After her funeral, I found myself alone in the kitchen, the dusk pressing gently against the window panes. The house was silent, but not the hollow kind of silence anymore. I turned on the light Harold had installed over the counter shortly after we married. 50 years ago, I turned on the light Harold had installed over the counter shortly after we married. 50 years ago. Its glow spread across the tiles, soft and steady. This light isn't for waiting anymore, I murmured. It's for peace. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the corner, a sound that no longer carried tension but comfort. I set a cup of tea on the table and let the moment stretch. Outside, the last bit of sunlight melted into the river breeze. Later, I sat at the piano and lifted the cover. My fingers found an old melody, something Harold used to hum while fixing the porch swing. The notes drifted out through the open window, mixing with the warm Savannah night. For once, the music didn't echo against grief. It simply stayed calm, certain, whole.